The city lights sparkled like scattered diamonds across the night sky as Haneul sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor of the towering glass building that bore his name. At 28 years old, he had built an empire that most people could only dream about. His company had started as a small tech startup 5 years ago, and now it had grown into a giant corporation with offices in 12 countries. Haneul was known throughout the business world as someone who never gave up, someone who worked harder than anyone else, someone who could turn impossible dreams into reality. But tonight, as he signed the final papers for his biggest business deal yet, he felt an emptiness inside that all his success could not fill. His phone buzzed for the 7th time that evening. Haneul glanced at the screen and saw Jimin's name lighting up once again. His husband had been trying to reach him all day, but Haneul had been too busy with meetings, conference calls, and negotiations to answer. He told himself he would call back later, just like he had promised yesterday and the day before that. The merger with the international corporation had consumed every moment of his time for the past 3 months. Jimin would understand. Jimin always understood. That was one of the things Haneul loved about his husband, his endless patience and gentle nature that balanced out Haneul's intense and driven personality. But what Haneul did not know was that tonight was supposed to be special. Tonight marked exactly 2 years since they had exchanged vows and promised to love each other through every joy and every challenge that life might bring their way. Jimin had planned a quiet dinner at home, cooking all of Haneul's favorite dishes by hand. He had set the table with candles and fresh flowers. He had even bought a small gift, a watch engraved with the date they first met and the words that Haneul had said to him that day in the coffee shop. But as the hours passed and the food grew cold, Jimin sat alone at the dining table, watching the candles burn lower and lower until finally he blew them out and put the food away. He did not call again after that 7th attempt. He simply went to bed, trying not to let the tears fall, telling himself that Haneul's work was important and that tomorrow would be better. Meanwhile, Haneul finally finished his work around 11 at night. He packed his briefcase, loosened his tie, and headed down to the parking garage where his expensive black car waited in its reserved spot. The building was nearly empty at this hour, with only a few security guards making their rounds and a couple of janitors cleaning the offices. Haneul drove out into the rainy night, his windshield wipers swishing back and forth against the heavy downpour that had started an hour earlier. The streets were slick and shiny with water, reflecting the red and yellow traffic lights in wavering patterns. As he drove, Haneul's mind was still half occupied with business matters. He was mentally reviewing the details of tomorrow's presentation, calculating profit margins, and planning his next expansion strategy. He barely noticed the beauty of the city at night or the way the rain created a soft curtain around his car. He did not think about Jimin waiting at home or wonder why his husband had called so many times. His phone sat silent in the cup holder, and Haneul told himself he would check those missed calls when he got home, maybe surprise Jimin with breakfast in bed tomorrow morning to make up for working late again. The intersection appeared suddenly through the sheets of rain. Haneul's light was green, so he continued forward without slowing down, eager to get home and finally rest after such a long and exhausting day. But what he could not see through the heavy rain and the darkness was another car approaching from the side street, going much too fast for the wet conditions. The other driver had been looking down at his phone instead of watching the road. He ran straight through his red light without even touching the brakes. Everything happened in the space of a heartbeat. Haneul saw the bright headlights coming at him from the side. He tried to swerve, his hands jerking the steering wheel hard to the right, but it was too late. The crash was deafening, the sound of metal crushing against metal, glass shattering into 1,000 pieces, tires screaming against wet pavement. Haneul's car spun around twice before slamming into a light post. His head struck the side window despite the airbag deploying. Pain exploded through his skull, sharp and terrible. And then, everything went dark and silent and still. The rain continued to fall on the wreckage as people began to gather. Someone called for an ambulance. Someone else tried to open the car door to check if Haneul was breathing. Within minutes, sirens filled the air and emergency responders arrived at the scene with flashing lights that painted the wet streets in alternating red and blue. Paramedics carefully extracted Haneul from the crumpled vehicle, placed him on a stretcher, and loaded him into the ambulance. One of the responders found Haneul's phone in the wreckage and saw the emergency contact information. The name listed was Jimin, along with a phone number. Jimin was already asleep when his phone rang, cutting through the quiet darkness of their bedroom. He had cried himself to sleep earlier, disappointed and hurt that Haneul had forgotten their anniversary again, that work seemed more important than their relationship. But the moment he heard the serious voice on the other end of the line identifying themselves as calling from Seoul General Hospital, all of those hurt feelings vanished, replaced instantly by a cold terror that gripped his heart like an iron fist. The person on the phone was professional but gentle, explaining that Haneul had been in a serious car accident and that Jimin should come to the hospital right away. Jimin did not remember getting dressed or grabbing his keys or running out to his car. His hands shook so badly that he could barely start the engine. The drive to the hospital felt like it took hours, even though it was only 15 minutes. His mind raced with terrible possibilities. Was Haneul hurt? How badly? Would he be okay? Jimin prayed over and over, begging the universe to let his husband be all right, promising that he would never complain about lonely dinners or forgotten anniversaries ever again, if only Haneul could be safe. The hospital emergency room was bright and busy even at this late hour. Jimin ran to the front desk, gasping out Haneul's name, and a nurse directed him to a waiting area where a doctor would come speak to him soon. Those minutes of waiting were the longest of Jimin's entire life. He paced back and forth, unable to sit still, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Other people sat in the waiting room too, all of them with worried faces and tired eyes, all of them waiting for news about someone they loved. Finally, a doctor emerged through the double doors. He was a man in his late 20s, with kind eyes and a calm expression that came from years of delivering difficult news to frightened families. His name tag identified him as Dr. Min-jae. He looked around the waiting room and called out for the family of Kim Haneul. Jimin jumped up immediately and rushed over, his eyes searching the doctor's face desperately for any clue about what he was about to hear. Dr. Min-jae led Jimin to a quieter corner of the waiting room and gestured for him to sit down. But Jimin remained standing, too anxious to sit. The doctor explained that Haneul had been in a serious collision. He had multiple injuries, including broken ribs, a fractured arm, and various cuts and bruises, but none of these injuries were life-threatening. The medical team had already treated the most serious wounds, and Haneul's body would heal with time and proper care. Jimin felt a wave of relief wash over him at these words. His husband was alive. He was going to be okay. But then Dr. Min-jae's expression grew more serious, and he continued speaking in a careful, measured tone. There was something else, he explained. During the accident, Haneul had struck his head quite hard. He had suffered what they called a traumatic brain injury. While his brain scans showed no bleeding or permanent physical damage, Haneul had woken up confused and disoriented. After conducting several tests and asking many questions, the medical team had discovered something concerning. Haneul appeared to have lost a significant portion of his memory. Jimin stared at the doctor, not fully understanding at first. Lost his memory? What did that mean exactly? Dr. Min-jae explained gently that Haneul could not remember the last 5 years of his life. His most recent clear memories were when he was 23 years old, just starting his company, living alone in a small apartment, working day and night to make his business dreams come true. Everything that had happened after that point seemed to be gone from his mind. He did not remember the company growing. He did not remember meeting Jimin. He did not remember falling in love, dating, proposing, or getting married. He did not remember the life they had built together over the past 2 years as husbands. The words hit Jimin like a physical blow. He actually stumbled backward and had to grab onto a chair to steady himself. The doctor continued explaining that this type of memory loss was not uncommon with head injuries, and that sometimes memories could return gradually over time. But there were no guarantees. Some patients recovered their lost memories completely within days or weeks, others took months or even years, and some never remembered at all. The only thing they could do was provide a stable, supportive environment and hope that being around familiar people and places might trigger the memories to come back. Jimin asked in a shaking voice if he could see Haneul. Dr. Min-jae nodded and led him through the corridors to a private room where Haneul was resting. The sight of his husband lying in the hospital bed, bandaged and bruised, with an IV line in his arm and monitors beeping softly beside him, made Jimin's eyes fill with tears. But he blinked them back, not wanting to appear weak or upset in front of Haneul. He needed to be strong right now. Haneul's eyes were open, staring at the ceiling with a confused expression. When he heard footsteps, he turned his head and looked directly at Jimin. There was no recognition in those eyes, no spark of love or familiarity, just polite curiosity, as if he were looking at a stranger. Haneul's voice was hoarse as he spoke. He asked who Jimin was and why he was here. Did they know each other? Was he a friend from work, maybe? Jimin forced himself to smile, even though his heart was breaking into a million pieces inside his chest. He walked slowly to the bedside and looked down at the man he loved more than anything in the world, the man who had promised to grow old with him, who now looked at him like they had never met. Jimin introduced himself carefully, saying his name and explaining that yes, they knew each other very well. He was someone who cared about Haneul very much and wanted to help him get better. Over the next hour, as Dr. Min-jae monitored them, Jimin tried to explain parts of their relationship without overwhelming Haneul with too much information at once. He mentioned that they lived together, that they were very close, that Jimin would be here to help Haneul recover and adjust. But he did not yet use the word husband, sensing that such a revelation might be too shocking for Haneul to process in his current state. Haneul listened with a mixture of confusion and exhaustion, clearly struggling to understand how he could have a whole life that he did not remember at all. The next morning, Kibum arrived at the hospital as soon as visiting hours began. Kibum was Haneul's best friend from university and his business partner for the past 4 years. At 30 years old, he had stood beside Haneul through every major decision and challenge in building their company empire. He had also been the best man at Haneul and Jimin's wedding, giving a speech that had made everyone laugh and cry. But when Kibum walked into that hospital room with a big smile and called out a cheerful greeting, Haneul looked at him with the same blank confusion he had shown Jimin. Haneul asked Kibum politely who he was. Kibum froze in the doorway, his smile fading as he looked to Jimin for explanation. Jimin quietly filled him in on what the doctor had said about the memory loss. Kibum was shocked and heartbroken for his friend. He tried showing Haneul photos on his phone from business trips they had taken together, from the company anniversary party last month, from countless meetings and celebrations. But to Haneul, all of these images were like looking at pictures of a stranger's life. He recognized his own face in the photos, but he had no memory of any of these events actually happening. Dr. Min-jae came in to check on his patient and found Jimin and Kibo sitting quietly beside the bed, both of them processing this new and difficult reality. The doctor took them outside to talk privately. He reiterated that the best chance for Haneul to recover his memories was to be surrounded by the people and things from his life. He should go home to his own house, see his own belongings, follow his normal routines as much as possible. The brain was mysterious and powerful, Dr. Min-jae explained. Sometimes a familiar smell or sound or sight could unlock memories that seemed completely lost. The key was patience and consistency. Jimin asked what would happen if the memories never came back. The doctor was honest with him. If that happened, then Haneul would essentially have to build a new life from where his memories ended. He would have to relearn who he had become over those missing years and rediscover all the relationships he had formed. It would be like starting over in many ways. But the doctor also emphasized that Haneul was still himself at his core. His personality, his values, his fundamental character, those things came from more than just 5 years of memories. The person Jimin had fallen in love with was still in there. As Jimin drove home that night, leaving Haneul to rest at the hospital for a few more days of observation, he felt completely overwhelmed by the situation. How could he help the man he loved fall in love with him all over again? Would it even be possible? What if Haneul's memories never returned and he decided he did not want this life he could not remember choosing? These fears swirled through Jimin's mind as he walked into their empty house, seeing their wedding photo on the wall, the accumulated memories of 2 years together scattered throughout every room. He picked up the small wrapped gift he had bought for their anniversary, the watch that Haneul would never receive now. And finally, alone in the darkness, Jimin allowed himself to cry for everything they had lost. 3 days later, Haneul was released from the hospital with strict instructions to rest, attend physical therapy for his healing injuries, and follow up regularly with both Dr. Min-jae and a specialist in memory disorders. Jimin came to pick him up, bringing comfortable clothes for Haneul to change into since his suit from the accident had been ruined. The drive home was quiet and awkward. Haneul sat in the passenger seat looking out the window at a city that should have been familiar but felt somehow different through the lens of his missing memories. He noticed new buildings that had been constructed in the past 5 years, businesses that had opened or closed, changes in the landscape that confused him. When they pulled up to the large, modern house in an expensive neighborhood, Haneul stared at it in disbelief. This was where he lived? The house was beautiful, with clean lines, big windows, and a carefully maintained garden in front. It was the kind of home that successful people lived in, the kind of place Haneul had dreamed about when he was working in that tiny apartment. But he had no memory of buying this house, of moving in, of making it a home. Jimin helped him out of the car carefully, mindful of his healing ribs and broken arm that was now in a cast. Inside, the house was even more impressive. The furniture was modern and expensive. Artwork hung on the walls. Everything was clean and organized and spoke of a comfortable life. But what caught Haneul's attention most were the photographs scattered throughout the rooms. Photos of him and Jimin together, laughing and smiling. Photos from what was clearly their wedding day, both of them dressed in elegant suits, surrounded by flowers and friends. Photos from trips to beaches and mountains and foreign cities. In every single image, they looked happy and in love, but Haneul could not connect to any of these captured moments. They felt like scenes from someone else's life. Jimin showed Haneul around the house, pointing out their bedroom, the home office where Haneul often worked late into the night, the kitchen where Jimin loved to cook. He opened closets to reveal Haneul's clothes, all expensive designer brands that confirmed how successful his business had become. He showed him the garage where 2 luxury cars were parked. He tried to do all of this gently, not wanting to overwhelm Haneul, but also hoping that maybe something would spark a memory, trigger some recognition. But Haneul just felt more and more confused and frankly a bit scared. This was all supposed to be his life, but it felt completely foreign. He kept apologizing to Jimin, saying he was sorry for not remembering, sorry for being this way, sorry for the trouble. And each apology broke Jimin's heart a little more, because Haneul had nothing to apologize for. This was not his fault. This was just a terrible accident that had stolen away their shared past. That first night was incredibly difficult for both of them. Jimin had made up the guest room for himself, thinking it would be too strange for Haneul to share a bed with someone he thought was a stranger. Haneul appreciated this consideration, but also felt guilty that he was displacing Jimin from his own bedroom. They ate dinner together, a simple meal that Jimin prepared, and tried to make small talk, but every conversation felt stilted and uncomfortable because they did not have the ease and familiarity that came from 2 years of marriage. They were essentially strangers trying to live together, and it showed in every awkward pause and uncertain glance. Over the following weeks and months, Jimin tried everything he could think of to help trigger Haneul's memories. He showed him videos from their wedding, hours of footage capturing the ceremony, the reception, the speeches from friends and family. He played recordings of voice messages that Haneul had left him over the years, loving words spoken during business trips or late nights at the office. He took Haneul to their favorite restaurants, the places they had gone on dates, hoping the familiar atmosphere might unlock something in his mind. He even contacted their friends and invited them over for casual dinners, surrounding Haneul with people who had been part of their life together. But nothing worked. Haneul was polite and friendly to everyone, clearly trying his best to engage and understand, but the memories simply were not there. He watched the wedding video like it was a movie about 2 other people. He listened to his own voice on those recordings, saying loving words to Jimin, and felt no emotional connection to them. He ate at fancy restaurants and appreciated the good food, but had no recollection of ever being there before. It was frustrating and heartbreaking for everyone involved, but especially for Jimin, who was watching the love of his life slip further and further away despite being right there in the same house. Jimin visited often, both as a friend and because he needed to help Haneul understand the business they had built together. He brought files and presentations, walking Haneul through the company's history, explaining deals they had made, partnerships they had formed, employees they had hired. Haneul was amazed by what he learned. His little startup had grown into something incredible, but again he had no memory of doing any of this work. It was like reading about someone else's achievements. Jimin was patient and supportive, never showing frustration even when Haneul asked the same questions multiple times or struggled to understand decisions that his past self had made. Meanwhile, Jimin was struggling emotionally in ways he had never experienced before. He was living with his husband, but feeling completely alone. Every day he woke up and saw Haneul, the man he loved, but that man did not love him back because he did not even know him. Jimin had to hide his hurt feelings, had to be strong and supportive, had to give Haneul space while also trying to build some kind of connection. It was exhausting and painful. There were nights when Jimin cried himself to sleep in the guest room, grieving for the relationship they had lost, wondering if they would ever get it back. About a month after the accident, Dr. Min Jae called them both in for a follow-up appointment. He had been monitoring Haneul's recovery carefully, both the physical healing and the memory situation. The good news was that Haneul's body was healing beautifully. His ribs were mending, his arm was recovering well, and he would be able to return to light work soon. But the memory loss showed no signs of improvement. Dr. Min Jae ran more tests, asked many questions, examined brain scans. His conclusion was that while spontaneous memory recovery was still possible, they should also prepare for the possibility that it might never happen. He suggested a different approach. Instead of constantly trying to make Haneul remember the past, maybe they should focus on helping him build a present. Let him get to know Jimin as a person right now, not as a husband from forgotten memories. Allow their relationship to develop naturally, without the pressure of trying to recreate something that was lost. If Haneul and Jimin could form a genuine connection in the present moment, that might actually be healthier and more sustainable than constantly chasing after memories that might never return. This advice hit Jimin hard because it meant accepting that the Haneul who had loved him might truly be gone forever. But it also offered a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could start over. Maybe they could build something new from the ground up. That night, Jimin made a decision. He would stop showing Haneul videos and photos from their past. He would stop trying to force memories to surface. Instead, he would simply be himself and let Haneul get to know him naturally, the way two people might get to know each other when they first meet. The change in approach was immediately noticeable. Without the constant pressure of trying to remember, Haneul visibly relaxed. He started asking Jimin questions about his current life, his work as a teacher, his hobbies and interests, rather than questions about their shared past. Jimin talked about his job at the elementary school where he taught children, about the funny things his students said and did, about his love of cooking and reading and taking long walks. Haneul found himself genuinely interested in these conversations. Jimin was kind and thoughtful and had a gentle humor that made Haneul smile. Slowly, carefully, they began to develop a friendship. They started having breakfast together every morning, talking about their plans for the day. Jimin would pack lunches for both of them, leaving little notes in Haneul's lunch bag with encouraging words or silly jokes. Haneul, working from home while he continued to heal, would prepare tea or coffee for Jimin when he came home from school each afternoon. They established small routines and rituals that belonged to this new version of their relationship. One Saturday, Jimin suggested they go somewhere completely new, a place they had never been together before so there would be no pressure of forgotten memories. He took Haneul to a beautiful park on the outskirts of the city where cherry blossom trees were in full bloom. They walked slowly along the paths, Haneul's arm still in a cast but healing well. The pink petals drifted down around them like soft snow, and for the first time since the accident, Haneul felt truly peaceful. He looked over at Jimin, watching the way the sunlight caught in his hair, the way he smiled at the beauty around them, and something warm stirred in Haneul's chest. It was not a memory exactly, but rather a feeling that being here with this person was exactly where he wanted to be. They stopped at a small cafe in the park and ordered drinks. As they sat across from each other at a tiny table, Jimin told Haneul stories about his childhood, about growing up in a small town and dreaming of moving to the big city. He talked about his parents who ran a small bakery and had taught him to find joy in simple things. He shared his fears and hopes and dreams in a way that was honest and vulnerable. Haneul listened intently, fascinated by this gentle, genuine person sitting across from him. Haneul found himself sharing too, talking about his own childhood, his drive to succeed, his fears of failure that had pushed him to work so hard. These were things from before his memory loss, from the years he could still remember, but also from the deep core of who he was as a person. And Jimin listened with such care and attention that Haneul felt truly heard and understood. It occurred to him that even though they were essentially strangers, he felt more comfortable with Jimin than he could remember feeling with anyone in a long time. As spring turned to summer, their friendship deepened naturally. Haneul noticed that he started looking forward to seeing Jimin at the end of each day. He found himself wanting to know what Jimin thought about things, wanting to share good news or frustrations from work with him. He began to care about Jimin's happiness and well-being in a way that went beyond simple gratitude for Jimin's help during his recovery. When Jimin smiled, Haneul felt happy. When Jimin seemed tired or sad, Haneul wanted to make things better. Kibam noticed the change during one of his visits. He pulled Jimin aside and said with a knowing smile that it seemed like Haneul was falling for him all over again, just in a different way than before. Jimin did not want to get his hopes up too high, but he had noticed it too. The way Haneul looked at him sometimes, the way Haneul seemed to find excuses to spend time together, the way their conversations grew longer and more personal with each passing day. It was not the same as what they had before, but it was something real, and it was growing. One evening, they were cooking dinner together in the kitchen. Jimin was teaching Haneul to make a traditional dish, patiently explaining each step. Haneul was trying his best but making a bit of a mess, and they both ended up laughing at his clumsy attempts. In that moment, covered in flour and surrounded by the warm smell of cooking food, Their eyes met and held. The laughter faded into something softer, something charged with an emotion that neither of them quite dared to name yet. Jimin felt his breath catch. Haneul felt his heart beat faster. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and hope, and something that felt very much like the beginning of love. Summer had fully arrived, bringing long, sunny days and warm nights. It had been nearly 4 months since the accident that had changed everything. Haneul had made a complete physical recovery. His broken arm had healed, his ribs no longer hurt, and the cuts and bruises had faded to nothing. He had returned to work at the company, though he was trying to maintain better balance this time, leaving the office at reasonable hours and not letting business consume every moment of his life. Kiboom had been instrumental in helping him relearn the intricacies of their business, and Haneul was grateful for such a loyal friend and partner. But the most important change in Haneul's life was not about work or physical healing. It was about the man who shared his home, his meals, and increasingly his thoughts throughout each day. Haneul had come to the undeniable realization that he had fallen completely in love with Jimin. This love was built on the months they had spent getting to know each other, on countless conversations and shared moments, on discovering who Jimin was as a person, and finding that every single thing he learned made him care more deeply. The situation was complicated, though, because Haneul knew that he was supposed to already be in love with Jimin. They were married, after all. This was not a new relationship beginning. It was an old relationship that he could not remember. Sometimes this knowledge made Haneul feel guilty, as if he was failing at something he should naturally feel. Other times it made him grateful, because whatever had brought them together the first time was strong enough to create a marriage, which meant that maybe his feelings now were built on a foundation that went deeper than conscious memory. Jimin, for his part, had also fallen in love all over again. The Haneul who had emerged from the accident was different in some ways from the man he had married. This Haneul was more open with his feelings, less consumed by work, more present in each moment. He asked questions and really listened to the answers. He showed appreciation for small kindnesses. He laughed more freely. Sometimes Jimin wondered if the accident, as terrible as it had been, had also given them a strange gift. It had forced them both to slow down, to pay attention to each other, to build their relationship on a stronger foundation than before. One Saturday evening, they decided to watch the sunset from the balcony of their home. The sky was putting on a spectacular show, painting itself in shades of orange and pink and purple. They sat side by side in comfortable chairs, each holding a cup of tea, enjoying the peaceful moment together. The silence between them was no longer awkward as it had been in those early days after the accident. Now it was the comfortable silence of two people who simply enjoyed being in each other's presence. Haneul turned to look at Jimin, seeing the sunset reflected in his eyes, seeing the gentle expression on his face. Something inside Haneul felt like it was overflowing, too full to contain any longer. He set down his teacup and spoke Jimin's name softly. When Jimin turned to look at him with those kind, questioning eyes, Haneul took a deep breath and decided to be completely honest about what he was feeling. He told Jimin that he needed to say something important. He explained that he knew he still did not remember their past together, and he was truly sorry for that. He wished he could recall their first meeting, their first kiss, their wedding day, all the moments that had led them to this point. But even without those memories, something had happened over these past 4 months. He had gotten to know Jimin as a person, had spent time with him, had learned what made him laugh and what made him worried, had seen his kindness and patience and strength. And through all of that, Haneul had fallen completely and utterly in love with Jimin. He told Jimin that this love felt real and true and deep, even though it was not built on shared memories. It was built on who they were now, in this present moment. Haneul said that he did not need his old memories to know that he wanted to spend his life with Jimin. He wanted to make new memories together, starting from this moment forward. He wanted to be the best husband he could possibly be, to never take Jimin for granted the way he apparently did before the accident, to always remember how precious this connection was. As Haneul spoke these words, Jimin felt tears sliding down his cheeks. They were not tears of sadness this time, but tears of pure joy and relief. He had been waiting so long to hear that Haneul cared for him, that what they were building together was real. Jimin reached out and took Haneul's hand, holding it tightly, feeling the warmth and solid reality of it. He told Haneul that he loved him too, so much that it sometimes hurt. He said that these past 4 months had been the hardest of his life, but also in some ways the most beautiful, because they had learned to truly see each other and appreciate what they had. Haneul asked if he could kiss Jimin, and Jimin nodded, his heart racing with anticipation. When their lips met, it was gentle and sweet and filled with all the emotion they had been building between them over these months. For Haneul, it felt like a first kiss, special and meaningful and perfect. For Jimin, it felt like coming home after a long journey, familiar yet somehow new at the same time. They stayed like that as the sun finished setting and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, holding each other close, grateful for this moment and for the love they had found or refound. That night marked a turning point in their relationship. They decided together that Haneul would move back into their shared bedroom. This time it was a choice they were both making consciously, not something based on forgotten history, but on their current feelings and desires. They lay in bed together, talking late into the night about their hopes for the future, making plans for things they wanted to do together, trips they wanted to take, dreams they wanted to pursue. It felt like a new beginning, and in many ways, it truly was. The next morning, Jimin woke up first. He lay quietly, watching Haneul sleep peacefully beside him, and felt overwhelmingly grateful that they had made it through such a difficult time and come out stronger on the other side. He was just about to get up to make breakfast when Haneul's eyes opened. But something was different. Haneul had a strange expression on his face, a mixture of confusion and wonder, and something else that Jimin could not quite identify. Haneul sat up slowly, looking around the room with wide eyes. Then he looked at Jimin with an intensity that was almost startling. He spoke in a voice that trembled with emotion. He told Jimin that he had dreamed during the night, but it was not really a dream. It was more like watching a movie of his own life, scenes playing out in his mind with perfect clarity. He had seen himself walking into a coffee shop 5 years ago, tired and stressed from work. He had seen Jimin bump into him, accidentally spilling coffee all over his important documents. But instead of being angry, he had looked up into Jimin's horrified, apologetic face and had suddenly forgotten all about work and deadlines. The images kept coming, flooding through Haneul's mind like a dam had burst. He remembered asking Jimin to sit and have coffee with him to make up for the spill. He remembered talking for hours that day, missing his afternoon meeting because he could not bear to end the conversation. He remembered their first real date a week later, going to see a movie and holding hands in the dark theater. He remembered months of falling deeper and deeper in love, realizing that Jimin was the person he wanted to build a life with. He remembered proposing on a beach at sunset, his hands shaking as he pulled out the ring, his heart soaring when Jimin said yes through happy tears. He remembered their wedding day so vividly now. The way Jimin had looked in his suit, the way his own hands had trembled as they exchanged rings, the promises they had made to each other in front of all their friends and family. He remembered their honeymoon, traveling through Europe and being so happy that they could barely believe life could be this good. He remembered moving into this house together, picking out furniture and arguing playfully about paint colors. He remembered late nights working at the office while Jimin waited patiently at home, remembered missed dinners and forgotten anniversaries, remembered slowly taking their relationship for granted because he was so focused on building his business empire. And he remembered the night of the accident, driving home in the rain, his mind on work instead of on the fact that it was their anniversary and Jimin had been trying to call him all day. He remembered seeing the headlights coming toward him, the moment of terror, and then nothing. But now, somehow, the memories had returned. All 5 years of them came flooding back in crystal clarity. Tears were streaming down Haneul's face as he told Jimin all of this. He said that his memories were back, every single one of them, and they were beautiful and precious, and he would never take them for granted again. But then he said something else, something that made Jimin start crying too. Haneul explained that having his memories back was wonderful, but it was not even the most important thing. The most important thing was what had happened over the past 4 months. He told Jimin that the first time he had fallen in love, it had been fast and intense and exciting, but he had not truly appreciated what he had. He had let work become more important than his relationship. He had forgotten to nurture the love they shared. He had taken Jimin's patience and kindness for granted, assuming it would always be there, no matter how neglectful he was. But this second time, falling in love with Jimin all over again while building their relationship from the ground up, had taught him what really mattered in life. It had shown him that Jimin was not just someone who fit into his life. Jimin was the center of his life, the most important person in his world. Haneul said that getting to fall in love with Jimin twice was the greatest gift he could ever receive. The first time had been beautiful, but incomplete. This second time had been built on truly seeing and appreciating every wonderful quality that Jimin possessed. Now that he had both sets of experiences and memories, he understood their relationship in a deeper, more complete way than ever before. He promised Jimin that he would never again prioritize work over their marriage, that he would never take their love for granted, that every day he would remember how lucky he was to have found someone as special as Jimin. They held each other and cried together, tears of joy and relief and overwhelming emotion. After months of uncertainty and pain, they had found their way back to each other, and they had done it not once but twice, which made their bond stronger than ever before. Jimin told Haneul that he had learned important lessons too during this difficult time. He had learned that he was stronger than he had thought, that love was worth fighting for even when things seemed hopeless, and that sometimes losing everything helped you understand what truly mattered most. Later that week, they invited Ki-bum and Dr. Min-jae to their home for a special dinner. Jimin cooked an elaborate meal, and they all gathered around the table to celebrate Haneul's recovery. When Haneul announced that his memories had returned completely, Ki-bum jumped up from his chair with a shout of joy and pulled his friend into a tight hug. Dr. Min-jae smiled with professional satisfaction, noting that he had seen this pattern before, where memories would sometimes return all at once rather than gradually, often triggered by an emotional breakthrough or moment of deep connection. They talked long into the evening, sharing stories and laughter. Ki-bum teased Haneul about some of the business meetings during his memory loss period, where Haneul had been completely confused about decisions his past self had made. Dr. Min-jae shared his medical perspective on the whole experience, explaining how remarkable it was that Haneul had not only recovered his memories, but had also used the period of memory loss to grow and change as a person. He said that not many people got the chance to fall in love with the same person twice, and that Haneul and Jimin should treasure this unique experience they had shared. The following weekend, Haneul suggested something special. He wanted to renew their wedding vows. Even though they were still legally married and always had been, he wanted to stand before their friends and family again and make those promises with full awareness and complete commitment. He wanted to do it right this time, not just because it was expected or because he was in love, but because he understood exactly what he was promising and what it meant. Jimin loved this idea, and they began planning a small ceremony to be held in their garden. They invited only their closest friends and family members. Ki-bum agreed to be the best man again, joking that he would give an even better speech this time since he had more material to work with. Jimin's parents came from their small town, bringing homemade treats from their bakery and tears of happiness in their eyes. Haneul's parents came too, grateful that their son had recovered from the accident and touched by his desire to recommit to his marriage in such a meaningful way. The day of the ceremony was perfect, with clear skies and gentle sunshine. They set up chairs in the garden beneath a simple archway decorated with flowers. Haneul and Jimin both wore elegant suits, standing facing each other as they had on their original wedding day, but this time with so much more understanding and depth to their feelings. When it was time for the vows, Haneul spoke from his heart, without any prepared speech or written notes. He told Jimin, in front of everyone who loved them, that he promised to cherish him every single day. He promised to never let work or ambition or anything else become more important than their relationship. He promised to remember the lessons he had learned during those 4 months when he had to fall in love with the same person all over again. He promised to see Jimin truly, to appreciate his kindness and patience and strength, to never take their love for granted. He promised to make new memories together every day and to treasure both the old memories he had regained and the new ones they would continue to create. Jimin's vows were equally heartfelt. He promised to stand beside Haneul through any challenge that life might bring. He promised to be patient and understanding, to communicate openly about his feelings instead of hiding hurt or disappointment. He promised to celebrate Haneul's successes and support him through failures. He promised to remember that love was not just a feeling, but a choice they made every day to care for each other, to prioritize their relationship, to build a life together based on mutual respect and genuine affection. When they exchanged rings again, sliding the bands onto each other's fingers with hands that trembled with emotion, everyone watching had tears in their eyes. These were not the same inexperienced young men who had married 2 years ago. These were 2 people who had been tested by a terrible accident, who had lost everything they had built together, and then had the courage and determination to build it all again from nothing. Their love had been proven through fire, and it had emerged stronger and purer than before. The celebration that followed was full of joy and laughter. People shared stories about Haneul and Jimin, toasted to their happiness, danced in the garden as the sun set and string lights came on overhead. Jimin gave his promised speech, and it was indeed excellent, making everyone laugh with funny anecdotes while also moving them with his sincere happiness for his best friend. Jimin's parents talked about how proud they were of both men for the strength and grace they had shown during such a difficult time. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Haneul and Jimin stood together beneath the flower archway, holding hands and looking out at the garden where they had just recommitted to each other. Haneul turned to Jimin and said that he wanted to make one more promise, a private one, just between the 2 of them. He promised that every year on this date, they would take a whole day away from work and everything else to spend together, talking and laughing and remembering why they fell in love not once, but twice. They would never let the busyness of life make them forget what truly mattered. Jimin smiled and agreed to this promise, adding one of his own. He said that whenever either of them started to take the other for granted, whenever work or stress or daily life began to push them apart, they would remember these 4 months they had just lived through. They would remember what it felt like to be strangers trying to find their way back to each other, and that memory would remind them to always cherish what they had, to never assume their love would survive neglect, to actively nurture and protect the beautiful thing they had built together. Months passed, then a year, and their renewed commitment held strong. Haneul did indeed work less and spend more time at home. He made sure to be present for dinners, to ask Jimin about his day, to show interest in the small details of life that he had once overlooked. When important business opportunities arose that would require extensive travel or long hours, he discussed them with Jimin first, and they made decisions together about what was truly worth pursuing and what could be let go. Haneul discovered that success in business meant very little if he had no one to share it with, and that the real measure of a good life was love and connection and time spent with people who mattered. Jimin bloomed under this renewed attention and care. He felt valued and appreciated in a way he had not felt even in the early days of their marriage. He continued teaching and found great fulfillment in his work with children, but he also made time for his own hobbies and interests. He took cooking classes and became an even better chef. He started writing a blog about his experiences, sharing thoughts about love and resilience, and finding joy in simple things. He and Haneul traveled together, taking trips to beautiful places and making memories that belonged to both of their conscious experiences. Their story became an inspiration to others who knew them. Friends going through difficult times in their own relationships would ask Haneul and Jimin for advice, and they were always generous with their time and wisdom. They would share the lessons they had learned, that love required active effort and attention, that taking someone for granted was the quickest path to losing them, that communication and honesty were essential, that sometimes losing everything helped you understand what truly mattered, and that there was always hope for healing and renewal if both people were willing to work for it. Dr. Minjae checked in on them periodically, both as a physician monitoring Haneul's long-term recovery and as someone who had become a friend through the whole experience. He was continually impressed by how they had turned such a traumatic event into an opportunity for growth and deeper connection. He sometimes used their story, with their permission, as an example when talking to other patients about the unpredictable nature of recovery and the importance of psychological and emotional healing alongside physical recovery. Kibum watched his best friend become a better, more balanced person and was genuinely happy for him. The business continued to thrive, but now it was managed in a healthier way, with Haneul delegating more responsibility and trusting his team instead of trying to control every detail himself. Kibum joked that maybe everyone should lose their memory for a few months if it led to such positive changes, though of course he was grateful that the actual trauma was not something anyone would have to repeat. As their second anniversary after the vow renewal approached, Haneul planned something special. He took a day off work and arranged for Jimin to have a substitute teacher so he could take the day off too. He woke Jimin early and told him to pack a bag because they were going on a surprise trip. Jimin was delighted by the spontaneity, something that would never have happened in their life before the accident, when everything had been scheduled and planned around work commitments. Haneul drove them to the coast, to a beautiful beach resort where he had reserved a private cottage overlooking the ocean. It was the same beach where he had proposed to Jimin 6 years earlier, though this time Jimin knew where they were going, and the surprise was what would happen there. They spent the day walking on the sand, swimming in the clear water, watching the waves roll in endlessly from the horizon. As sunset approached, Haneul led Jimin to a specific spot on the beach, a place marked by distinctive rocks. He told Jimin that this was the exact spot where he had proposed the first time. He remembered it clearly now, remembered kneeling in the sand with the ring box in his shaking hand, remembered the way the setting sun had painted everything golden, remembered the overwhelming joy when Jimin had said yes. But he wanted to create a new memory here too, one that belonged to both of their conscious experiences. So he pulled out a small box and opened it to reveal a new ring, a beautiful band engraved with the date of their vow renewal and the words they had said to each other that day. He told Jimin that this ring represented their second chance, their renewed commitment, the love they had fought for and rebuilt from nothing. He asked Jimin if he would accept it as a symbol of everything they had been through and everything they had become together. Jimin was crying as he nodded yes, holding out his hand so Haneul could slide the ring onto his finger beside the original wedding band. Then Jimin surprised Haneul by pulling out a box of his own, revealing a matching ring for Haneul with the same engraving. They had both had the same idea, Both wanted to mark this chapter of their life with something tangible and meaningful. As they stood on that beach, with the sun setting behind them, wearing rings that represented both their original love and their renewed love, Haneul and Jimin understood that they had been given something rare and precious. They had been given the chance to fall in love twice with the same person, to learn from their mistakes, to grow and change and become better versions of themselves. The accident that had seemed like a terrible tragedy had ultimately become a strange kind of gift, teaching them lessons they might never have learned otherwise. Their story was one of resilience and hope, of second chances and the power of love to overcome even the most difficult challenges. It showed that memories were precious, but not as precious as the living, breathing connection between two people who chose each other every single day. It demonstrated that true love was not just about feelings or romance, but about commitment and effort and the willingness to start over when necessary. And most importantly, it proved that sometimes the hardest journeys led to the most beautiful destinations, and that losing everything could teach you the true value of what you had. If you enjoyed this story of second chances and true love, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming romance stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship from the ground up? What lessons have you learned about love and commitment? Your stories inspire us to create more content that touches hearts and reminds us all of the power of love. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our next upload. And remember, true love is worth fighting for, no matter how difficult the journey may be. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.